Hello everyone, my name is Will Gorecki. I'm an electrical engineer focused on embedded systems and circuit board design. My guests today are Keegan and Ryley Karl, two out of three brothers that founded DarkAero, a company designing the fastest, longest range, carbon fiber, two-seater airplane kit that consumers will be able to buy and build themselves. Keegan is their mechanical engineer, Ryley is their aerospace engineer, and River, the third brother, is their electrical engineer. They have been working on this company for over 8 years, and they've been posting their progress on YouTube along the way. They have amassed almost 100,000 subscribers in that time. This is my conversation with them about what it's been like to build an airplane company from the ground up as three brothers. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you. So basically, you guys have covered a lot of the technical information about DarkAero and kind of everything that you guys have been doing, and you've been recording that and putting out that information pretty much for years. So I kind of wanted to focus a little bit more on some of like the personal aspects of you guys and what you guys have kind of gone through in the last few years with DarkAero and everything. So I don't know if you guys just want to kind of start off giving like a quick overview of your work backgrounds, like what you guys studied in college, when did you graduate, and then what you kind of did after college, but before you kind of transitioned into DarkAero.
Okay. Do you want to go first, Keegan, or you?
Sure.
So
I graduated in 2010 mechanical engineering with a mechanical engineering degree from UW-Madison. And then from there, I was kind of just looking for work and ended up getting a job doing some contract work at a company called Cummins. I worked there under a contract for 6 months and then got hired on full time. And then I ended up working there for 6 years. This was just south of Madison, so I stayed living in the apartment I was living in when I graduated. And then a couple of years into that, Ryley ended up moving back to Madison. Then we ended up living together, and then we ended up working on the aircraft together. And then that kind of led to, I guess, the path of DarkAero, from late nights working on the plane and having conversations about the whole thing. So that's kind of like a quick, brief overview of like up to speed.
Yeah, my background, I graduated in 2008, UW-Madison in aerospace engineering, and then I spent 2 years working for Caterpillar down in Illinois after graduation, and that's where I got my pilot's license and started building my first airplane called a Cozy, which is all built out of fiberglass. And Keegan and River put in some time on that with me as well. So after I moved out of Illinois, I came back to Madison, brought the plane with me, and got a hangar here at the Dane County Regional Airport. And then I worked for like 6 years for Weir, industrial pump company in Madison. And I was doing a bunch of different stuff for them. My title was like engineer, but I did like testing and material science and manufacturing engineering. So a broad range of things, but the whole skill set was roughly applicable to what we were doing here with composite materials. And then, about halfway through that stint, started moonlighting at doing DarkAero with Keegan and River. And then been doing DarkAero full time since that.
Yeah, so you guys started I was doing some research, and I think you guys said you started kind of moonlighting around maybe 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how far back this kind of went. To give you guys some context, I graduated high school in 2015.
Okay.
And then I didn't realize when I met you guys back in Madison, I didn't know where you guys were at the time. So now, after having gone back and watched a bunch of the videos, I was like, oh, interesting. The entire time I've known them, they've been kind of working on this in the background.
Yeah, we were sort of like secretive about it in the first 3 years when we were moonlighting it. I mean, like our girlfriends and significant others knew about it, and like our family members, but like we weren't publicly broadcasting anything. So I think we were, I don't know, sort of secret about it for like a year after we went like full time on it. Like we didn't have a YouTube channel. We didn't have, I think we had like a really rough bare bones website was about it. And then our real public debut or public announcement that we were working on it was at AirVenture 2018.
Yeah.
And that was like after we left our full-time jobs and like went full-time on DarkAero, we drew a line in the sand at that point in time. We're like, okay, wherever we're at, like a year from now, we're going to show up at the AirVenture Air Show and present what we have to the public and just kind of gauge feedback or what the interest is. So we, I think at that time, we really were not far along when we said we were going to like unveil this thing. We're still figuring out a lot of the manufacturing stuff and sorting through a lot of details of the design. But I'm glad we like put it out there when we did and started making it public. Like you could maybe argue that we jumped the gun or we're putting too much out too early, but I think we've gained a lot more from just being public about it and sharing our journey. Like we've been able to network and connect with a lot of useful people in the industry, and just interesting people. So that's been pretty cool. So I think there's a lot of value in just like sharing what you're working on, whether for good or for bad.
Yeah, for sure. It honestly, some of the things you just said kind of leads me down a couple different questions I wanted to ask you too about some of that. I guess the first thing is like, when you guys initially started, what was that experience kind of like? Because you started telling people, and I feel like I had a similar experience when I started working on my jet suit, where you started telling people like, hey, yeah, I'm doing this thing and I'm actually doing it and I'm taking it seriously. What was kind of the response for people around you? Was it kind of like you got to be kidding, or was it more? Now granted, you had built like you said, you had built one airplane, so maybe it wasn't that far-fetched. It was a little different when I said, hey, I just bought some jet engines and I have this grand plan and stuff. And so I'm kind of curious what the response when you guys started saying like, hey, we have this idea that we want to actually start executing on.
I think depending on the group of people that you told it to, the response was different. So like, for example, our parents were just concerned that we had health insurance when they found out. And then when we told our significant others, they were basically just wondering how much time it was going to suck up. And then when you tell people like within the aviation realm, I think there's a lot of skepticism. Like that first year at AirVenture, when we showed up with just the wing and the empennage or like the tail sections, people thought it was cool, but I think they thought that we were just kind of, I don't know what the right term is, like messing around or just like feeling out the industry. But yeah, after we kept going on it, I think people started realizing that we're pretty serious about it. And the more progress that we make or made, and then the more that we shared online, and the further along that the aircraft continue to develop, I think people are at a point now where like universally across the board, they're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And I think you guys are going to make it happen. But I think there's a lot of skepticism in the beginning.
Yeah. A couple of things I'll add on that. So like aviation in general, like, or at least in the industry we're in, like experimental or home built aircraft, is a little bit wary or skeptical of anything new. Kind of paradoxically, they want to see new stuff, but then anytime like new things come along, there's like a little bit of caution or skepticism. So we had to overcome that. But overall, I'd say like people have been pretty enthusiastic and interested in it. And I think there's this component of just like us putting ourselves out there and like showing that we're serious and like keeping at it and being consistent, like kind of builds trust within the community or our audience. They're like, okay, like they're still doing this thing, they're keeping at it and they're making progress. So I think when you're consistent like that, people, it builds faith, I guess, in the whole project. But like before you have that, I think there's this element of like taking your own leap of faith, like, okay, we're going at this. And when you're doing it kind of quietly in the dark, you're not telling anyone about it, like you have this comfort in like, well, I can quit anytime. Like no one knows if I like messed up on this and back out. But that as soon as you put it out there, then it's like, okay, this is real. And there's a, I don't know, just overcoming like a certain amount of self-doubt with that. But at the same time, there's like a snowball effect where I think the more you work at it and the more you have little mini milestones, it kind of just builds confidence. Like the public is confident in you and you're confident in yourself. So yeah, at a certain point, it's like you feel like you're closer to the other side.
Yeah, at some point, like when you both for yourself and for other people, when you start, like, as you, I mean, as you said, as you keep iterating and you keep making progress and you keep succeeding, at some point people have to start saying, well, damn, like they actually are pretty good at what they do, and that kind of stuff. How did you guys, so I know you were Ryley, you were building your own airplane.
Mhm.
How did you guys decide as three brothers that you were going to do it together? Like, was it one person's idea and then the other two got on board, or was it kind of like everyone agreed, like, oh, this is an interesting gap in the market that we all agree would be interesting to work on? Like, how did that kind of transpire?
Um, I don't remember like specifically whose idea it was. Like I think so Keegan River and I had been talking about starting a company together for like years before this. We had like a shared Google Doc dating back to like when we were all in college. I think River was even in high school at the time. And we just kept dumping like ideas in there and kind of brainstorming different stuff. And it was all over the place. Like some stuff with like computer science and medical ideas and like things that weren't like even within our wheelhouse, but it was like, well, this might be interesting. But the airplane thing was like a good fit because it was something that we were all interested in, but like with our different areas of expertise, we had kind of our own area of coverage, but then like good overlap too. The skill set was really applicable to the whole thing, but I don't really remember specifically being like uh, it probably wasn't as well thought out of a decision when we actually did it. It was just like, yeah, let's do this.
I think in hindsight, we didn't have a well formulated like structuring that we wanted to approach it as. It was more like, I trust Ryley, I trust River, let's share this. And we shared all our ideas with each other. And when this idea was shared, it seemed to stick more than the others. And then as we talked about it more and the potential of it, it just kind of snowballed, like Ryley said. So we kind of just kept building or rifting off one another as we talked about it more and more. And it just seemed like it had a lot more merit to it than some of our other ideas. And we hadn't thought about bringing other people on board because I think we still thought it was a pretty wild idea. And we're like, I don't know if I can trust other people with this idea. So yeah, and then, Riley's background is aero, mine is mechanical, and River's electrical. And we thought between those three backgrounds, we had a pretty good coverage of, at least on the technical side of things, on what we would come across for the aircraft. So,
Well, yeah, that pretty much covers any almost anything you guys would want to do, honestly. Um, so how has it been working as three brothers? I mean, all things considered, it seems like you guys are pretty in sync with one another.
Yeah,
But again, like, I'm curious what goes, behind the scenes. Like, has that been, it seems like more of an advantage with you guys, but has it been a disadvantage at times, or has it been pretty smooth, to be honest?
I think overall it's an advantage because um, you know, between your siblings, there's probably no one you trust more because at the end of the day, it's like, we know all each other's secrets and like our strengths and weaknesses. We trust each other and we're like not afraid to share our true thoughts with each other. And like, we're not afraid to yell at each other. Whereas like, if it was just maybe some like buddies from school, like you might tread a little bit more lightly, but we're definitely not afraid to like, argue about stuff,
yeah.
which is good. So like, I think at the end of the day, it helps us converge to like good solutions on everything. But we also had to learn, I think, to work professionally together because it is different than just like being some brothers, like horse playing around versus like, okay, now we're starting a company and we're getting serious. So there've been like a number of times where we had to like kind of sit down and like think about like broader how do we work as a team and how do we like resolve conflicts and work through things and be effective together.
Yeah, I think the other thing that helps too is that there's three of us. So there's always a tiebreaker. So if two guys are on the same page and one guy's not, it's kind of hard to be like one against two. So that helps. And then, like Ryley said, it's just easier to like trust one another. Like if I were to bring on another teammate that was like my best friend, someone I didn't grow up with, I'm very like brotherly level, I might be more reserved if it came down, like, because I mean, like, starting like a hardware company is really challenging just because like we're being self-funded. It, like, the financials is always in the back of our mind, and I don't know if I'd be comfortable talking about financials with someone outside of Ryley and River, just because there's like hard conversations that you have to have, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you experienced this doing the jet project or, you know, the jet pack. It's like you got to buy stuff, and then like your bank account's going down, and then like you maybe didn't make the progress that you thought you were going to make, and there's just like all these challenges that are a lot more than the technical challenges, and having like really raw conversations with someone is a lot easier when they're your brother and you can speak your mind versus yeah
That's interesting. I think I didn't run into that too. I mean, financials is one thing. Granted, I didn't have anybody else, and so that made it easier in one sense. And the other part of it was I never took it to a point where I was trying to use it to sustain myself. It was always just a project in the background for fun, and so and I wasn't even trying to make a product out of it either. This wasn't something that I'm planning on marketing or selling. It was just for me for fun, and so it's a little bit easier to deal with that. But again, I can see where you guys, like, again, when you, especially when you transition to, okay, this is what we're doing full time and this is what we're going to use to support us. I can see that's a hard conversation, and especially if not everybody agrees. That kind of leads into what I wanted to ask next, which was like, was there kind of one point when you guys kind of felt like, okay, this is going to work and we can take this forward and we can make this full time? Or was it kind of like a gradual transition of like, you're just working on it more and more and more in your free time, and then at some point it's like, well, we saved up enough money where now we can give it a shot and see what happens, and then slowly each time you kind of build up confidence with each part that works? Can you kind of walk me through what that process looked like?
Yeah, it was kind of like a soft start, right? Going from like brainstorming to starting to buy some like hardware and tools and like build things and test things out. Like, for example, when we started, we thought 3D printing and additive manufacturing was going to be a lot instrumental in, or like a core piece of our technology. And so we bought like a 3D printer and started playing around with it, and then like realized that wasn't going to work and had to go a different direction. But we spent like 2 years messing around like that. And then we did at some point say like, okay, we're going to go in on this full time. And like a year from now, we're all going to leave our full-time jobs and go in on DarkAero full time. So like we knew it was coming, basically. We all agreed. Like, I think we all put in our like 2 weeks notice on the same day. Like we agreed, like, this is it. So that was kind of interesting.
Pivotal moment.
Yeah, right. But so like over that course of time, you have this time to just mentally adjust to the idea of like, this is what I'm going to do. There was no like jumping off the cliff kind of thing. It was more like a gradual transition to that. But there were like certain like milestone days, like, okay, putting in my 2 weeks notice and like leaving my job. That's certainly like big, like no turning back kind of thing. I don't know what else you want to say on that, Keegan.
Yeah, I think the big thing is like what Ryley said, there's no like key moment. There's just like, it's like waves where like you have something really good that happens that makes you feel very confident that this whole thing is going to succeed. And then it could literally be an hour later or a day later, something breaks or something doesn't go how you thought it was going to go. And then it's like, maybe this won't work, right? And then you fluctuate between those feelings, but like if you were to graph it, it's like you're still moving upwards towards your goal. So like it's not like looking back, it's easier to be like, okay, we're making the right progress that we need to. But sometimes it's hard when you have your head down day in and day out, just like trying to solve problems, whether it's like financial or engineering or like something that came up that you weren't expecting. But the one thing that kind of helped us there is we did make it a point to do some level of like looking back. So like every month we do like a month review. It's like, are we closer to where we wanted to be. And then we started publishing that as an update as well. And I think the YouTube thing helps, right? Because it's something you can easily look back on and be like, okay, a year ago or like 2 months ago, we were here and we didn't even think we would like accomplish XYZ or get past XYZ.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever like a key moment of like, this is it,
Yeah.
we got it, we're gonna succeed.
Yeah.
It was like little wins here and there and a slow gradual thing. And like, I mean, there's still every day like elements of doubt and just like, oh
Yeah.
man, this is hard.
Yeah.
But then the idea is like, hopefully you can do like, 2 steps forward and limit the number of steps back.
Right.
But like, there are those days where it's just like, oh man. And I've come to like be a little bit mentally temperate and all that, where like recognizing your state of mind, and like if you are feeling like, oh man, this sucked, or this didn't work, or this broke, and or if you're feeling just like low energy about something, just recognize that it's a temporary state of mind. Like, okay, if I tomorrow I'll wake up, it'll be a new day, I'll probably be more energized and have more I'll be wiser tomorrow, basically.
Honestly, you guys, so everything you just said resonates with me so much, just with what I worked on with like the jet suit project, because it was the same thing where it's like, you just take it step by step, and it's like, okay, first I'm just going to buy a jet engine and see if I can even turn the thing on. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then, okay, that worked. Like, maybe I can design a little circuit board and a little throttle for it. And maybe I can make that portable and put it in a backpack. Okay, well, I guess that worked. So like, maybe I can do that again and make 2 of them. And you slowly just test each thing, and it slowly keeps working. And if you just keep doing that for, a year, 2 years, 3, like it makes sense how you get as far as you do. And it's also interesting too, because I've had those days where you're looking at it and you're tired and you've been staring at the same problem and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, and there's just that, like, did I really decide to do this? And then you go and you get a good night's sleep and you come back the next day and you're like, no, I'm on the right track. Like, I just got to figure this out. And you guys kind of brought up a point too about the YouTube, which is like a good way to track the progress. And so when you guys kind of started this off, was that always a plan, or did that kind of come up organically of like, oh, let's post stuff? Because you guys have grown pretty big. I think I want to say you almost have 100,000 subscribers or something on YouTube. Was that part of the plan, or was that kind of an organic side project?
It was not part of the plan, although it's become like a big piece of the story now, or what we do. I think it was like the whole plan from the beginning was very humble and like not elaborate. But yeah, I think doing stuff on social media, we actually started on Instagram, and we're working on Instagram for like a year before we did anything on YouTube. And even that was like, oh, we probably should post something on social media. I think that's what people do. And it was like no strategy, just very cavalier about it. And then after we got doing it more and more, we got better at it and started realizing like, oh, this is a tool that we can add as a component of our business.
Interesting. So one thing I'll say, because I did, as I was coming into this conversation, I watched a bunch of your old videos kind of going through, and through each video, you guys sound like very confident about the thing that you're discussing. But like, I assume you guys, it doesn't start off that way, right? So it's like, how does that process look? Do you guys you start at the next section, the landing gear, whatever the next part is you have to do, and you struggle through it, and I imagine you have some really, really hard days, and then by the time you're filming a video kind of going over everything, you figured everything out, so you're like super confident about this is how it is and this is how it works. Is that kind of how that looks?
We break stuff behind the scenes and learn from that, and then we try to think about the type of, like, initially, like Ryley said, it was pretty humble. Even when we were starting the YouTube channel, it was more of just like, hey, here's what we have going on in the shop. Like, if you watch any of our earlier videos, there's like no organization to them. It's just like kind of haphazard, like filming stuff going on. Now we try to structure them a little bit better into like a more cohesive story where it has like a beginning, middle, and end. And it's usually centered around us completing some sort of milestone with the aircraft, whether that's painting it or maybe getting the landing gear functioning or whatever it may be. But yeah, we kind of lay out like okay, this would be a cool story to tell about the aircraft that we're currently working on. But then it really just depends on what the project is and how we go about filming it. But like we try to collect footage along the way, and then we try to take that footage and make it into something that we think would be informative, educational, and useful to the community of aviators, if you will, or people who are just interested in general. So we're trying to keep that in mind now when we make videos. We have a little bit more intent behind them than just like filming ourselves, like messing around with the aircraft.
Initially, it was like a lot of just like off the cuff, here's what I'm working on today. But then as we got better at YouTube, we put more thought into each video, and like there's a certain amount of scripting involved. Like some of them are like we have a rough outline for the things we want to talk about, and other ones like you want to say things in a very specific way to explain it, just so that everyone will understand it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we now it's like the YouTube thing was more maybe fun initially, and now we treat it more as like we take it seriously, right? So it's more like I don't know, another aspect of a job, I guess.
Well, you treat it, I imagine now you treat it much more professionally in the way that we're not just, like you said, we're not just posting it for fun. Now we're actually, this is a part of our company. That's an important structure. And I also imagine, I imagine too, it ties into the composites course you guys are doing now as well, which is like, do you guys feel like, well, I want to ask you about the composites course and how that's been going, but also do you feel like the work that you've been doing with YouTube has been helpful in structuring how you guys communicate during the composites course? Like, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I think they both kind of feed off each other. You know, like I don't think Keegan River, like any of us were like really like stellar at speaking, either like on camera or like public speaking. Like you have to do it in school to a certain extent. They make you take like one of the like comm arts requirements, like a public speaking course. And, you know, we've done different like performative art things in high school, but we weren't like awesome at it. So it's a skill we've had to work at, and we're still like working at it. What was your? We're going with this.
Feed into like.
Oh yeah.
The aerospace course. Yeah, I guess the YouTube is nice. It's kind of a double-edged sword. You get a lot of noise from it, right? There's a comment section, so people can leave whatever comment they want, good or bad. Most of the time, it's good. And there's a lot of good, I guess, commentary that can occur, conversations that can occur, and a lot of the videos that we post are about composites, right? So you can kind of use it as a feedback loop to kind of gauge the room. And I guess in part, the aerospace course kind of came out of the fact that we were, you know, publishing a lot of stuff going on with the aircraft, most of which has been composites up to this point. But yeah, before the aerospace course and before, well, kind of in parallel to YouTube, we had created a knowledge base on our website, which was kind of like a culmination of some of the things that we had pulled together for like builders or people who, like, a lot of repeat questions would come up, and it's like, man, I don't want to put this in an FAQ, but maybe we can put this in a document that we already have behind the scenes and then get that out there. And then, you know, as you keep doing these little things, you kind of just start building off of it. And that's kind of how the aerospace composites course was born. It was born out of like the YouTube stuff and like the knowledge base stuff that we had.
And people just asking like, hey, you know, you make a video teaching something, just like, you know, making like a little tip or whatever, like do this way. And then people are like, man, you should just teach a course. And like enough people said that, we're like, hey, maybe we should. And so we put it together, and it's been pretty successful. We continue to run it. We just did our like 15th session, I think, last weekend. So
wow, that's a lot more. I didn't realize how many classes you guys had done.
Yeah, we usually do like one a month. So we've been doing it like a year and a half now, roughly. And we've had over 100 people come through it. So it's been good because, you know, we see a broad range of students, like all sorts of different backgrounds and skill sets. So it's forced us, I think, to get, you know, really be on top of our game in terms of our understanding, but also how we can explain it and then like teach it. And like with I guess this goes with YouTube as well. Like when we first started putting stuff out there, we weren't thinking about so much our audience is just like, just explaining it like we're talking to each other. But then you realize like we get comments and people contacting us, and it's like all the way from like retired like Boeing engineers down to like elementary school kids. And so it's like when you think about explaining, or an elementary school kid is going to be listening to this, is this going to make sense? So you have to be able to explain it in all sorts of different ways. And so that I think feeds into like with our courses as well.
Have you guys gotten that? Kind of just brought up an interesting point that I hadn't really thought about, but initially when you guys started, you were saying that, there was some doubt as to how successful you guys would be. But now as you guys kind of teach this course and kind of even interacting with comments on YouTube, right? Like at some point you guys, I imagine you start to realize like, hey, the things we're doing are working, like we know what we're talking about. How often do you run into people who either for whatever reason they think they know better than you do and they're incorrect, or they want to try to prove you wrong? Like how often do you guys kind of run into that stuff? Do you engage with that at all, or do you just kind of ignore it, if at all?
We have a saying around here that's the internet always wins.
The internet will be undefeated. Yeah, always wins.
So no matter how much you think you know, or whether you are speaking the truth or not, someone is going to think otherwise. So we have a rule also around here where we don't engage with someone who is kind of coming off either like combative, or I don't know.
You can tell,
yeah, it's a negative comment, right?
For sure.
And our rule is that you don't engage with that unless you've engaged with every person that has a more informative or educational or positive comment. So engage with those people first, and then if you have time and energy, engage with the negative comment.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I just have a hard time. I don't deal with it very much, but I just have a hard time understanding why some people do what they do online, because some people are really there just to learn, and they're like, yo, I have a question, or this didn't really make sense, or I think you might be wrong about that. But then some people are just like out to prove you wrong. And
yeah,
I just don't get it, because I've never been like that. And I've always been just really open about trying to learn. But some people just seem so combative, and I never understood it.
Yeah, I'm like, I mean, at the end of the day, those people do exist, but they're a minority. So yeah, you have to keep perspective, I guess, that most people are like just there to learn or be entertained or whatever. Like they don't have a chip on their shoulder or something, some agenda. But yeah, it's usually the ornery people that like talk the loudest in the comment section. So it's sometimes hard to dismiss or ignore them. But yeah, we've kind of established a policy that's just like, don't engage with that sort of feedback. Yeah, that sort of communication, unless you've already like addressed all the supporters or fans. And like, if you got 100 comments and 98 of them are positive, like it's unlikely you're going to get through all the 98 positive ones and then have any time for the negative ones.
Right. I guess kind of moving this along then. So as you guys have been doing this, right? Like I imagine you started off and you had some good ideas about maybe how you were going to do this, but there was a lot of unknowns. How did you guys work on setting requirements, and how has that kind of changed along the way, right? Because you're going to have to make decisions. Everything's a trade-off. And that's another thing I want to ask you guys about is like, what have you guys learned about trade-offs? And that's all engineering is effectively. But what has your experience kind of been with setting requirements, refining those, making sure that you're hitting those correctly? And then how do you balance trade-offs and agree to what your real, like the goals are?
I think that's a big challenge for us, because we have like aspirations for things we want to do with the aircraft or refinements we want to make, but we know we have to draw a line in the sand because we're either financially constrained or time constrained. So I think
it's the laws of physics,
or just the laws of physics. So we are like kind of constantly working on that. If we run into something that's like an unknown and we're trying to work through it, we try to address those like as quickly and as cost effectively as possible. as I'm saying all this, I'm trying to think of a good example, but we have gone down paths where we've maybe should have like cut our losses earlier, but it's part of like the learning process.
Yeah, so it's like defining requirements is like really important, and this is something that we actually like hammer a lot in our courses, or like when we do consulting work, is like what are our requirements? What are we trying to do here? What's the goalpost? And yeah, and sometimes you have to, you might set some goal out there and realize like, okay, all these things I'm trying to do simultaneously are not achievable. This like some of these requirements are in conflict, and so you have to decide. But like, it's hard to have like a really structured process that works every time. Like sometimes you just kind of have to use best engineering judgment. But yeah, like Keegan was saying, there's definitely been times where like we have certain goals, like keeping all the manufacturing in-house. So we've tried to do certain things like making manufacturing canopies. That was one path where we like, our requirement was keep it in-house and keep costs under control, but it ended up biting us and wasting a lot of time and money, and then end up having to outsource it. But yeah, it's actually really hard. I wish I had a better like
I wish I had an
answer that's like, this is exactly how you do it.
Well, I think it's a challenge that everybody, it's a challenge that everybody deals with. And I started a new job recently doing, it's a company that does consulting for like startups and other companies and stuff. And that's a huge thing is trying to figure out requirements. And especially in this case, like if it's coming from an external customer, and maybe they're not even engineers. And so it's like trying to refine what their goals are, but then also, okay, that's great that you want that, but it's going to cost this amount. Well, then if you can't do that, then we're going to have to do it this other way. And getting those really drilling down on the requirements. It helps you make decisions, but like, I totally get it. And so I was just kind of curious how you guys had dealt with that. And do you guys feel like you've gotten better with it? Obviously it's hard, but.
Yeah, I think, one really important thing, and maybe it seems obvious, but just like writing it down or documenting it, step one is important, because you'd be surprised the number of times you like forget, or like if you're trying to juggle like 15 requirements simultaneously, and what is the priority of them, at least putting it down on paper and having the team agree like, okay, this is what we're going to focus on, number one. I think that helps a lot. And we like beyond just like engineering requirements, we kind of have multiple little like mini meetings like monthly and weekly, and we spend a lot of time debating just like priorities, but at the end of the day we always try to write it down and document it and make sure everyone's in agreement. So I think that's one thing that can solve a lot of headaches, is just documenting it and make sure everyone agrees on the requirements.
I think one thing that helps too is that we have gotten better at bouncing ideas off one another before we go too far down the wrong path. So like if I'm working on something, I'll have like a little mini milestone, and then I'll converse with Ryley and River, and they'll have a fresh set of eyes to look at it and kind of scrutinize it. And then I can recalibrate and go from there, versus like bashing my head against the wall, trying to force this one thing to work, and then keep going down that path, and then lift my head up a week later and then talk to Ryley and River and find out I was going in the completely like wrong direction. So we do like, I think we kind of feel it out depending on what the project is, but we'll like check in with one another and be like, hey, does this make sense? I'm like trying to solve this. And then someone will have some good input. And then it's kind of like this thing where you're like bouncing back and forth and figuring out as you go, but that doesn't really help answer the question.
Did you guys get better at, because I imagine initially when you're starting off, and especially when you're one person working on a project, it's really easy because you're just like, I'm just going to do today whatever needs to be done. But then when you start adding more people, I've seen how that gets infinitely more complex. And obviously you can do a lot more, but it's also really hard sometimes to keep that organized. And like, how have you, this kind of goes along with the requirements, but like, have you guys gotten a lot better at kind of organizing as a team versus, I imagine when you started, it was just kind of hectic and each person was kind of working on their own thing. But now it's like, how has your organization gotten better over time? Or maybe it hasn't. What does that kind of look like?
I would say it's gotten better. It's like we could always get better from where we are at too. Like I think we're always trying to improve at that. But something that helps is like I kind of mentioned before, but just having like regular meetings, just to like checking in with each other to make sure we all understand where we're at, where we're going, but then not letting it bog everyone down to like, meetings are kind of a drag, right? So we'll try to set like a time limit on it, like do it for like an hour or whatever, not like it, don't let it consume the whole day, and then come prepared and yeah, don't let it become more of a burden than it needs to be.
Yeah, we also have a thing too, where it's like you should come prepared with like solutions, not just problems. Like it doesn't help to just bring up a problem and then put the weight of that problem on the rest of the team. And now the rest of the team is dealing with this problem when they could have been productive. So yeah, we've gotten better about that. Before we used to, we'd bring a problem to the team and then we wouldn't really have a solution ready to go. But if someone sees something and then, like a problem, for example, we have a better job now that, the person will be like, hey, I identified this, but I thought of this. What do you guys think, for example?
Yeah, one of the things I could say too about the idea of the concept of going from like working solo to working in a team. Yeah, there's like pros and cons with that. And so the challenge with a team is just like keeping everyone in the same direction and not letting the size of a team like bog you down, because it's easy to have like distractions or whereas like when you're just alone, you just focus and just crank stuff out. But there's just like waste or inefficiencies associated with having multiple people, like just taking the time to communicate and understand what you're doing. Whereas in your own mind, instantly, like, of course you're on the same page as just me. So one thing we've done with that is like, try to set aside time that's specifically for your individual tasks, like focusing on your projects. Because that, if you're trying to just get in the zone and crank on your own work, like that takes focus. And if you're getting interrupted constantly, someone asking you questions or hey, this is broken, help me out, like that's going to make your own focus time very inefficient. So we try to like set aside time, like this is my core time, don't bug me. And then we'll do the teamwork stuff, in the afternoon or whatever, different time.
Do you guys have like a way of project managing, where is it kind of one person setting the tasks, or is it kind of each person knows what their specific, like in this case, River's on the electronics, like does each person have their own specific set of things that they need to get done, and you're all trying to hit like one goal into the future, where it's like, okay, this date we want the airplane, we want to do an engine test, and so each person has their subset of tasks? Or is there one person who's kind of project managing and the other people are kind of following? Like what's that kind of division look like?
We pretty much set our own rules for that. Like we'll meet monthly, like at the end of the month, at the beginning of the month, we'll kind of map out like what are we going to try to hit this month, and then we'll all three lay that out, and then we'll talk about if any of the things that we came up with, if they're in conflict. For example, if River was going off and like doing some landing gear testing, but Ryley didn't have the landing gear at a point where it's ready to be tested, obviously that's not going to work out. So we do have like a meeting like that we'll do at the beginning of the month to just like map out like, can we get this all done in the next 4 weeks? And then we'll meet like at the end of each week to try to like recap where we're at. And then depending on the day or the projects or what we have in front of us, we might meet like periodically throughout the day or the week and just like recalibrate as we go along. Because it's hard to do that, right? Like when you're designing something for the first time, there's like unknowns that are going to come up. So even though you mapped out like this is what I want to try to get done this month, you might have this issue that you had no idea was going to come up that's related to the goal that you set. So now you're going to have to spend the next 2 weeks figuring that out, which throws off like the rest of the stuff that you had planned.
Yeah.
So we obviously try to set goals and like hit those, but then there's always something that comes up that was unanticipated. And it's especially hard when we're also doing the business end of things, trying to hit like certain financial goals as well, so that we can keep like things moving forward. It's not just like coming in here and like solving the technical challenges, we're also solving the financial challenges in parallel. So like there's this conflict of like, do I do plane stuff or do I do business stuff? And then like, how do I balance that? Because like I could hammer out and do a bunch of plane stuff, And that would be good, but like now I'm slipping on the financial end of things, right?
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, with the project management stuff, I think overall, like we probably spend like 75-80% of our time kind of working solo as if we're each own our own department within the company. I mean, it's only 3 guys right now. Sometimes we've had interns, but like realistically, we function like our own mini departments, and then sometimes we have to convene. How do our systems jive together? But then once in a while we'll have projects where it's like all hands on deck. We're all going to focus on this to meet like some deadline or whatever. And actually those are the projects I enjoy the most. I think we actually work really well, all 3 as a team, when it's like, this is the goal. And we've been working together long enough that we somewhat know each other's thoughts, or like with the strengths and weaknesses. And I'm always kind of surprised when we'll like set out a goal and it's like, okay, all hands on deck to focus on this. And we've been like pretty successful at that. Like, for example, with like painting or like building molds, we all got really good at all working at that. Like building molds requires usually like all 3 of us for like a big mold, and we all kind of know what to do. So yeah, that's like fun working more on a team, but most of the stuff like your little like focus tasks, you just kind of have to do solo.
How is you guys brought up a point that I hadn't even thought too much about, but honestly, how's the business side of things going? Because the one thing I'll say is like, and this was when I was dealing with my Jetsu project, like I wasn't selling this. I wasn't planning to do anything with it. So I only got to do all the fun stuff of just designing new things and playing with it. And
Yeah.
how was it to start to transfer into the business side of things? And have you guys struggled prioritizing that because you want to do the fun stuff of like, oh, we got this new part we got to design? Or has it been a struggle to balance the business side, or is that just as exciting to you guys now that you guys have kind of proceeded as far as you have?
It's exciting, but it's also nerve-wracking, right? Like you're trying to keep this thing alive, and you need to earn money to do that. And since the plane isn't flying yet, you have to come up with creative, like small value-add products along the way, which is something that can be a struggle, right? Like, do I come up with a $15 bottle opener and sell 100 of those and I made $1,500, or do I focus my efforts on a $1,500 product and try to sell 10 of those, like, and then like, what does that look like? And like, how would we market that? Or how would that be value add to us that like ties into the aircraft, right? So like, you don't want to go off into a tangent and start making like surfboards, even though like we could probably do that and probably sell them because we have the composites knowledge, but does that really help us like get to the finish line with the aircraft? So like, thinking about the course that we started, it was like, okay, there's a lot of net benefits that come out of this, not just like the business side of things, because we get to network with people. We get to figure out like, if we have to train composite technicians, can we formulate this material in a way that like they could follow and like sit in on the course and then start working on their first part for the DarkAero? Or is it useful, since this is a kit and builders are going to have to build this, could they come through this course and feel more equipped to build the aircraft? So like, we try to come up with value add products that weave in really nicely with like our skill sets and what we already have going on, but also like are actually legitimately good products that like support the business in a multifaceted way beyond just like, cool, we made $1,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you guys decide to make a DarkAero surfboard, send it my way. I have a 15-minute walk to the beach, and I've gotten into surfing. So if you guys do that, that'd be sick.
You could be our R&D department for the surfboards.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be respectful of your time here, so I guess I got one last question for you guys. What do you think is the darkest time that you guys went through as a team to try, or like just with everything? Where was there a time where you guys were really just like, we don't know if this is going to work? We think we spent a lot of money and we're really concerned about how this is currently going. Did you guys ever hit a point like that, or has it pretty much been like consistent growth and fairly smooth along the way?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think if there's like a darkest moment, but like we definitely had just some down days. or like, got in really like tough arguments about things. But I think if there was one that was particularly stand out.
I don't know. That's a really good question. It's one that like I'm glad you asked because I feel like you only can ask that question if you've attempted something yourself, because you have these dark moments when you're venturing off on your own and you have the self-doubt. I think we've all had different levels of that at different moments in the company, just because we have personal lives going on outside of work as well. And you can have like an argument with your significant other, and that can be coming off of something that happened really poorly at work. And then you have all this like flood of self-doubt that comes rolling in. I can't think of like one particular thing that we did where like all three of us were like, this is it. This is like really bad. But I will say that when we load tested the wing, it was kind of this culmination of like all these efforts that we had pulled together, and getting to that point to be able to test the wing and plan it out and like actually conduct the test was probably the most nerve-wracking thing, because we had a lot riding on it.
Yeah.
Like we had a new design, it's like kind of a testament of all the little small testing that we had done up to that point. And it was just this big moment. And then when it passed, it was like this huge wave of relief. And I think we all felt it at once. And it was like, you go from this like level of uncertainty and darkness, and then you pull yourself out of it. And it's like, you're riding this high, and you have those moments to different degrees in different levels. But I think the wing load testing was probably one of the biggest ones, where you're like this level of certainty and like unknowingness, and then you ride out of it and it's like, this is great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's not what dark, maybe not the right word, but like emotional height. I think that was that was pretty intense. Like, I feel like leading into that, the anxiety or anticipation, just wanting it to go right. I remember like that feeling, almost like not sick, but just like so emotionally wired from that. And then it passing, it was like, yeah, the biggest roller coaster.
Dude, I
Yeah.
totally get it, because again, with testing the jet suit, it's like I had days where so there was a point where I was testing where I was living in Milwaukee, but I was testing at a friend's place in Madison. And that's actually probably one of the times I swung by when I saw you guys. I was probably on my way there. But I'd have these days where it would take me an hour to pack up my car, an hour and a half to get to my friend's place, half an hour to unpack and set up. And you have a bunch of things you want to test and you hope it goes well. And I had those days where some days everything went well, and it was like the biggest it was an adrenaline dump of like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, this is so cool. And then you have those days where it's like you set up, you've taken all this time and all this energy just to get there, and your entire day is just shit. Nothing works. It starts raining, none of your stuff, you're dumping fuel everywhere, and you're like, and then you drive home. Well, actually, it was funny. I had one of those days where I blew the entire day. All the testing went horribly. It took me forever. On the way home back from Madison to Milwaukee, my car broke down and I had to get a tow. So I got home, I unpacked, and it was like late at the end of the day. And I just kind of sat on my bed and I was just like, that was a rough day. And those are those lows you guys are talking about. So I totally get it. And then you have those days where you have some test that validates the thing that you've been working on for the last year or two, and you're like, this is fantastic. Like, I feel so good about this. So I totally get those. And to just continuously do that for as long as you guys have, I have to imagine. Well, I can't imagine you get used to it. It's just you recognize it for what it is, right?
You do kind of get used to it. You just get more numb, I would say.
Yeah.
You get like
Or stoic, maybe.
Yeah, less emotionally attached to certain ideas or outcomes or things. You just see it more through the lens of like, okay, how do we fix this? Or like, how do we move forward?
I imagine you expect it more, where you're like, when something bad happens, you're like, this isn't a surprise, this isn't unexpected. I know that this happens. But it's the same when things go well. You're like, well, we just worked really hard on this, so like, that's cool, but also I kind of expected it to go well because of how much work we just put into it. So that's interesting. But I suppose that also allows you to start, as you grow and do that allows you to do things that you previously thought were impossible, because as you as you get used to those smaller wins and losses, that probably helps build you up for those bigger wins and losses. And I imagine you just keep growing and iterating on that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I want to respect your time here, guys. So I'll wrap this up. Thanks a lot for talking with me. It was really interesting on my end. I actually learned a lot about kind of how you guys have gone through this. It was really interesting doing a lot of research and just kind of watching back through all your videos and stuff. So best of luck with your upcoming endeavors. And I can't wait to see the thing start going through flight testing. So
Yeah, thanks, Will.
Yeah,
yep,
thank
thanks
you.
a lot, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.